Hello and welcome to the Victors Podcast. My name is Dr. Lisa Marino. I'm joined with Aaron Hazelbaker. And today we have a very special guest from Impact Compounding in Tip City, Ohio. Our guest is Dawn Trame, and I'm going to introduce her in a little bit. But first, just wanted to get right into the topic because it's very exciting. A lot of research coming out, and today we're going to be talking about peptides. But we're going to be specifically focusing on the GLP-1 agonist, which you've probably heard about in the news, commonly referred to or recognized as Ozempic or Wegovy. But we're going to dive deeper into that, into actual understanding the peptides and maybe some uncommon ways of even naturally boosting how we use this peptide in our bodies, the uses for it. And so we're going to get into who's appropriate for it. It really, I don't have to state this fact over and over again, but it's 80% of Americans that are pre-diabetic don't even know it, right? And so we have this huge common problem. It's not just like, oh, that'll happen in my 40s or 50s. It's 30s and 20s that people are coming to us, even in their teens, because they're having polycystic ovarian syndrome or having issues with insulin resistance earlier and earlier. And so we need to address this from, I think 42% of Americans are obese now, and it's a problem of diabetes, and we all know that metabolic health, only about 12% of the country are metabolically healthy, and so this was a big issue, and these peptides come in to us as a solution and as another avenue that we're looking at to be able to help folks heal and to even heal tissue and regenerate. So very exciting topic. If you have been struggling to get to the bottom of your insulin resistance, if you've been struggling to get to the bottom of your health issues, you've been trying to work on your gut health, you've been trying to exercise, you've been working on your stress, this could be a missing component for you or your family member, or even your children. And so we need to bring this GLP-1 agonist to light and help you uncover it, understand it. And we wanted to bring in the expert. And so that's why we brought Dawn Trame here from Impact Compounding. So Dawn has been a pharmacist, I'll say, for over 30 years, and she's a graduate of Ohio Northern, and I'm going to let her share her background because it is unique, and we're so fortunate to have a compounding pharmacy right here in our regional area in Ohio, and I'll let her explain a little bit more about what a compounding pharmacy is and why that makes it different. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. So yes, compounding pharmacy is just very exciting and kind of how pharmacy started originally, of course. And so we are able to prepare prescriptions that providers would like a patient to try that may not be available commercially. And sometimes it's because the patient might have an allergy to a manufactured product's filler. Sometimes it's because they don't fit into the mold of the manufactured product. 4 sizes fits all. Maybe they're in between. So there's lots of different reasons to compound and make these products from the actual medicinal powder. And so we can make it per order. And it's just very exciting to be able to help the provider help their patient and meet the patient where they're at.
How did you get into it, Dawn? I would love to hear your story about this.
So I was invited to work at a compounding pharmacy about the same time that my mother had a football-sized ovarian cyst that she thought was a tumor. Oh. And so she needed help with her hormones because she was put on a commercial product, wouldn't speak to a family member outside of the house unless you got her to come to the phone. She just struggled so much. And so I was able to research, and so hormones were really my first endeavor that I learned more about with compounding to try to meet her needs where she was at. And yes, within 3 weeks, she was more of a normal, more her normal self. And so that was really what started my journey. And so then, you learn more about, well, who else can I help? So it started with a menopausal woman, and then I figured out, oh, you can help perimenopausal women. And then certainly, children need things, and people need help with their thyroid. There's just all kinds of different things that led me here. Yes, this
yeah, to this people place. Just not fitting in the mold. I love how you said that, because it's so often what we find is just that we have one way, one plan. Oh, this is your diagnosis. This is your prescription, instead of personalizing things. And that's what we really appreciate about Impact and about working with you, Dawn, is really that personalization, the little pieces that we kind of put together for each patient. So we really appreciate that. And that's where I think we really wanted to get into this discussion about peptides, because we were so thrilled a couple months back to realize that just right around the corner from us, here you are in Tip City, and you're compounding GLP-1, which is an amazing peptide. So let's get into that a little bit more. Let's kind of get in, what is a peptide, and how do we explain that to folks so that they can understand?
So the GLP-1s, which are glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonists, if we can all say that real fast 10 times. So it is something that is released after eating, and so it helps us to control our blood sugar. So what happens with diabetic patients is that they either are not responding to what this peptide is doing. So it's supposed to help them secrete insulin, and it's supposed to help us corral our carbohydrates from simple sugars that are running around into the cells to work as energy. And so this is not working for a diabetic person who is either insulin resistant, their body's not responding to that, or they're not making enough insulin. So what these medications are doing is it's helping to stimulate the insulin production so that this can help the patient's body work better. It's also helping decrease glucagon, which is a hormone that also can increase blood sugar, so it helps reduce that. So it's working, helping the body work so that it can lower the blood sugar and help patients better with their diabetes and their overall health, their disease state. There's so many, certainly diseases that happen because patients have diabetes. Yeah. So the other way that these medications work is that it helps in our brain. It helps with our feeling less hungry, and so we're not maybe eating as much. It also helps delay gastric emptying, so it helps us feel full longer. And so what they're finding is in these diabetic patients is that they are losing weight, which in essence then helps their whole picture, their diabetes, their whole health picture.
Yeah, again, just that insulin resistance piece being so huge, and that's something we found in our practice, over time being just so impactful throughout their entire health picture. If we are insulin resistant, then it becomes really challenging to do those things. Losing weight, getting hormones under control. Is cortisol a part of the picture, as we were speaking about previously, before we even started the podcast? And we have all of these pieces, and when we have insulin resistance as a part of that picture, it makes it really dang tough to heal all of these other pieces too. So we're really glad to talk about that today. But I think the cool part is, Dawn, and we've talked about this, we know that this is not a cure-all, and we don't intend for it to be used that way. So do you want to talk a little bit about the protocol that we've kind of formed together, about, with our patients, before they even, hear about Dawn and Impact Compounding? We have a protocol at Victress that we utilize, and then Dawn helped us to kind of put this together. So I can speak a little bit to that, and then Dawn, I want you to jump in too. So we start with a protocol with our patients. We are very upfront with them. Before we have you even start on this GLP-1, first of all, have we tried a couple other things to help? So one of those things is actually what Dawn has sitting behind her here. It's berberine. We really love berberine. It helps us with initiating that GLP-1 and your body formulating those on its own. And so we have to understand our body has the ability to formulate these peptides. That's the cool part about it. So berberine can be really helpful for folks, just kind of getting started. The other component of that, though, is we don't just take berberine on its own and expect a miracle to happen. We need to be looking at the other components as well. So the two other components that we're absolutely looking at with this are, they must be doing some sort of strength training so that we're able to work on maintaining or increasing our skeletal muscle mass. Because if we just add these GLP-1s, we start to lose weight, we can lose skeletal muscle mass just as quickly. And that is so stinking problematic. That's how you see that rebound weight gain, that, patient that, is, yes, feeling better, losing weight, or, just kind of starting down that trend, and then they quickly rebound. If they have one weekend of, eating junk food or, falling off the wagon. So
Yeah.
that's an important component of this is, maintaining that skeletal muscle mass. But the other component too is nutrition. So we do need to change up the way that we think about eating as well. And so, we kind of worked on that with Dawn too. It's like, okay, yes, we need to be strength training. Yes, we need to be working on the nutrition component as well. So nutrition for us means that, yes, we are lowering those simple carbohydrates. Yes, we are focused on eating the appropriate amount of protein, per day. And generally speaking, again, we would want you to talk with your provider about this, but generally speaking, that's 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And I'll often have them, kind of be looking at that on a spectrum. If you weigh 300 pounds, we might not necessarily need to be looking at 300 grams of protein. It's more like, what's optimal, and so we'll talk with folks about that. Again, that's why it needs to be with the assistance of a great provider too. So yes. Then we can add in, kind of speaking with Dawn, hey, we have this patient that's worked on A, B, and C. Things are moving in the right direction, but we need a little extra help. So then we kind of jump over and have that conversation with Dawn. So Dawn, you want to fill us in on, what would be the next steps for our patients then?
So a lot of times what we look at would be the whole picture of hormone balance and then stress and cortisol balance and things like that. So that's typically where I would come in to help, would be to speak with you about where's this patient at? Should we get some labs and see where things are at for them, like what their bottom line balance is? Because sometimes when hormones are out of balance, like with estrogen dominance and low progesterone, that'll hold on to every ounce of fat that anybody has.
That's
if you
right.
have high cortisol or low cortisol, which have the same symptoms sometimes, then that is another way of that. It's just, it won't matter sometimes what patients do. And that's when they feel like, gosh, what am I doing wrong? I'm doing all these things, but it's just, there sometimes is an underlying unbalance that we can help with. And so then we would work together to figure out what is that. And then the other thing I want to add to that is, and I feel like you do this at your office as well, but we like to follow up with patients.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of what you said earlier about, well, they say, here's your prescription, I'll see you next year for your annual. And it just can't be like that. People need to talk about how they're feeling. Is this working? Is it not working? And if it's not working, then why? How are you feeling? What are your symptoms? So that an adjustment might need to be made, earlier than later, and that you can help meet the patient where they're at with their struggle, with their journey, with the other things that are going on. Sometimes there's other things that are important that are affecting them that they only had 10 minutes to tell the gynecologist when they were in there, because that's just how conventional medicine is unfortunately working a lot of times. And the providers don't like that either, but yeah, it's just how it is.
Yeah, we see that all the time. There's so many great providers that are stuck in just a stinky system. And so we understand that. And that's where we really appreciate working with Dawn at Impact, because we take the time. Our providers have the ability to give Dawn a call and say, man, I'm kind of stuck on this patient. Can you fill me in? And that's where I kind of wanted to go a little deeper too, because yes, berberine is an option. Yes, we have a probiotic that is, can be added to your gut to increase GLP-1 production. And there's sometimes when we're really stuck. And that's when we're sending folks over to Dawn as well. And that's when we're talking about that GLP-1 peptide that we're giving them, whether that's orally or, again, can you speak to that a little bit more, Dawn?
So there are the injectable forms that are being prepared as a compound so that patients can have access to these. And there's also oral forms that are being prepared that can be used sublingually with a mucoadhesive base, which means it latches on to the mucus in our mouth and stays more absorbable than longer, so that it's working longer and getting into the system. It has more of a chance to get into the system, I should say, than swallowing something like an oral tablet that has to go through the liver, because you lose so much when it goes through the liver. And so the sublingual products can be very helpful to help the patient get this medication in, and at a lower level, so not quite as strong as the injectable. And so working a little bit more slowly and working your way up to a good place for for weight loss.
Sure.
And another, it helps with inflammation and some other things.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's why you're seeing less side effects, right? Right.
Yes,
Excuse me,
yes.
that you're seeing, less occurrence of nausea,
Correct.
and vomiting, and
Correct.
the fatigue, and all these things, because you're able to dose it appropriately, and it's not just, again, like you said, one size fits all. You're able to dose them, even at half the dose, I think a quarter of the dose some of the times, than what they would
I
traditionally
would
hear.
say yes, that would be about right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so, and I just wanted to just be sure that everyone knows that we do not dose them. I'm working with a provider to help the provider.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great point, because the
Yes.
pharmacist shouldn't be just, handing out
Yes.
drugs to anybody. It's
Absolutely.
there's like a system of
Yes.
checks and balances.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's exactly right, Dawn.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
like your provider needs to provide the prescription to Dawn in order for Dawn. And that's where we
Yes.
have those conversations is, hey, Dawn, I'm a little stuck. This seems like what prescription would we want to look at? And having that relationship with the provider and the pharmacist is something that has been lost. And we are not seeing that when we're working with compounding pharmacies like Impact.
Yes, and it's a great feeling to work as a team.
Absolutely.
It's the patient, provider, pharmacist triad. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, back to how healthcare
Yes.
was designed to be. And so that's why
Yes.
we have so much hope, and we're so glad to be able to provide this information for patients. Like, it is out there. You can find, really good healthcare, and at a reasonable cost. It's not an arm and a leg, to
Right,
get good
right.
healthcare.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's incredible. One of the things that you mentioned was the whole cortisol, issue.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you said that, because it's like, you can fight tooth and nail. I can fast, for 24 hours, and I can, or 3 days or whatever. But
Yeah.
like, if you are in this constant state of stress, that you are just in fight or flight all day long, like your body's gonna hold on to that, not let you heal, because it's focused on fighting whatever's in front of you. And so, the other component that we're super passionate about addressing, or at least helping patients to be aware of, is like, okay, just because we're addressing the insulin resistance, you may be losing some weight as a consequence, all of that. Are you still okay with who you are? Are you happy, with who you are? Have you addressed the wounds? Have you addressed, the trauma, the pain, right? Number one, to get results, but number two, to your happiness is not tied to your weight.
Yes.
It's not tied
Yes.
to, certainly everybody wants to feel better. Nobody likes to be grumpy, but at the same time, how am I healing, body and soul? And we just try to make sure that that's at the forefront of what people do. And that, gosh, you seem to be really struggling, and not that we make everybody do this, but it needs to be part of the conversation. Are we talking about counseling? Are we talking about, how is your prayer life, or how how are your relationships, and bring that to light. Just because, again, you don't want to give them a false sense of hope of like, oh, just do this miracle thing.
Right.
Everything will be okay.
Right.
It's like, we got to work on ourselves too. And I know that's challenging. It's challenging to hear, too, but we all just want to wave a wand and make it better. But I think we can face the hard conversations. We love listening to one of our favorite psychologists, and he's like, you got to go into the anxiety, obviously when things are safe and you're in a safe place, right? Obviously, but if you have somebody with you, can you go into the anxiety? And maybe that means with a counselor, or with a friend, or with a spouse, or whatever. But like, you can't run from it. It's not going to get better. So
we love the saying, you go with you. So whether you're working on your journey of weight loss, whether you're working on your journey of just
Hormones
overall health and
and
hormones and things, it's like, how come I don't feel better? It's because you go with you. So if you're going to the gym every day and you're just going because I hate my body, that same, mindset is going to be so easy for you to say, well, see, I do hate my body, and now I skipped a day, and then the shame cycle starts again, and et cetera. So that's why it has to be, a really an approach that comes from everybody. So, Dawn's piece is so important. It's so impactful. And if that's the only thing we're doing, really focusing on these GLP-1s, and I'm gonna get better, I'm gonna heal myself through this, and we put all of our, again, faith in this, then we're really challenged to see, great results, whether it's through insulin resistance results, whether it's through weight loss, all of these things that can be a component, might not be there if we're not addressing these other issues.
Right.
yeah.
And I think women in general do tend to they put too much pressure on themselves.
Sure.
And then it's a constant struggle. And I don't mean that men don't, but I find that with women, there's just a real pressure. And sometimes just when I'm talking to patients, that comes out. They start to cry, and yeah, I just don't like to be around my family like this, and how can I feel better? And so it's not just even about skipping the gym. Sometimes it's, I yelled at my son, or something like that, and they don't like themselves, and so we just have to get to the bottom of it and try to figure out, well, what's and maybe even it's a building block of start on this and work and then go to the next step. Yes.
But you said exactly right. Maybe they only had 5 minutes with this provider or on that certain day or whatever. So again, the checks and balances of like, you're allowing them to open up to you and say, wait a minute, I feel comfortable with you, so I'm going to share with you, what I'm really going through. And now it's okay. We're able to keep that relationship open, and they're able to, things don't get missed. Nobody's falling through the cracks.
Yes.
That's really important.
Yes, it is. That's
well,
a great
maybe
way
you
to say
could
it.
just share the who is this appropriate for? Who would be appropriate for a GLP-1 agonist? Who are you recommending this for?
Oh, I would say that it would be somebody that maybe needs a jump start to help them to get into losing the weight that they maybe are stuck on having, stay there. and I think that there are some providers that are using this low dose for actually cardiac health to try to get the A1C down.
Absolutely.
To try to help with the blood sugar issues that are at hand. They're finding that it could be working to help keep us from collecting plaque on our arteries. There's all these things that are still being studied, but we do have some providers that are just using the low dose for that and not particularly weight loss.
Well, inflammation,
and
like
inflammation,
we talked about,
yes.
Because if insulin resistance is a huge driver of inflammation, I mean,
Yes.
this is a big piece of that. So I'm so glad you spoke to that.
Yes.
Yeah, we probably should have been more clear too. Insulin resistance you can think of as like pre-diabetes. It's
correct.
Probably an easier
Yes,
way
thank
to
you.
understand that. No, yeah. What studies are showing is that generally if you are pre-diabetic, if you are obese, if you do have cardiac issues, that you have a deficiency in these GLP-1 agonists. So we're actually being able to study that, and that's what we've talked about, the natural ways of boosting that you can do that too, but that as across the board, that generally there's this lack of this peptide in the body anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
And I think the other piece of that too is, how do I know I'm insulin resistant? This is a big thing that we talk about with our patients too, is that generally speaking, if you go to your physician, they are only checking something called fasting glucose. And this is what's really important to us. And Dawn knows this because we hound this with our patients. We, make sure that we're checking this. Fasting glucose is the last of the metrics to change when we're looking at that insulin resistance piece. So that's what's always checked. If you are above 90 on that, we're starting to kind of take a glance and say, that's not very good. So if you kind of can look back at your previous labs, you could see that.
Yes.
The problem is that's the last thing to change. We will see usually A1C, and even before that, fasting insulin will change. So your fasting insulin will start to go in the wrong direction, and then pretty soon A1C goes with it. And then finally, about 10 years after that fasting insulin gets going in the wrong direction, then we see fasting glucose change. And so that's a real problem with mainstream healthcare, is that we're not seeing that. The idea is that with these numbers, then we can really start to take a peek at this. You've got that little extra belly going. You've got that, just can't kind of get going like I used to. You've got that fatigue. You've got that, I'm tired all the time.
Well, even history of gestational diabetes.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
If you've ever been told you've had polycystic ovarian syndrome,
Yes.
struggling with fertility, all of the ththings that you should be looking for, again, that we're seeing earlier and earlier, be like, I can't be diabetic. It's like, we need to know because it's more common, it's more frequent. We don't, have time to go into all of it. Even, seed oils, we're seeing, the trend, diabetes incidence increases as we've introduced things like processed foods and oils and things. So you might even, be thinking you're eating pretty clean, but like we just need to know. And it's a simple, easy, inexpensive test to have your fasting insulin tested.
Yep.
So,
So I think the idea is that we love introducing Dawn to our patients that are a little bit stuck. They're a little bit, things, just the typical, again, prescriptions, the typical supplements, the typical recommendations might not be, cutting it. again, we really try to personalize things at Victorious, but Dawn helps us to continue to personalize that. And that's why we really loved Impact, is the ability to work with Dawn for our providers, to sit with Dawn and say, okay, what do you recommend here? This is what I'm seeing. This is what I would typically do. What does Dawn say? What does Dawn say when she looks at these labs? And that ability to have that relationship. So we're really appreciative of that, Dawn. Anything else you want to add?
I think that the relationship is very important, and we can try to get to the bottom of what's going on with the patient as a whole. And so, yeah, meet them where they're at. I love them meeting the people where they're at. Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
And supporting them. Yes. And supporting them. Excuse me. Yes.
Any patient stories that come to mind that you would like to share?
Trying to think of there's just so many great people that I've gotten to meet. But there was one lady in particular that had an issue where she couldn't wear pants because of her situation with her lack of hormones, and her doctor called, and I had never talked to him before. I knew him, but I had never talked to him, and he called me on the phone and said, "Wow, I heard you're the person I need to talk to." And we came up with a natural solution of, more natural, excuse me, I should call it natural, but it'd be more not, oh, you're not fitting in this size of hormone replacement. And so we came up with a hormone formula for her. And she called me 3 weeks later, and I go to the phone, and I can't even hear what she's saying. She's crying so hard. And I'm like, oh no, what is going on? And when she finally collected herself, she said, "I was finally able to wear pants.
Oh
you have no idea how much this means." And I don't know why that's probably been 18 years ago. And I will just never forget it, because that's an extreme example of somebody's life changing. But yeah.
Well, even we've had stories where, patients will start coming to us that, oh, my employer's sending us here, to us at Victorious, we don't really know that much about you. And say, we work with this lady named Dawn down at Impact, and do you guys work with them? We say, of course, we love Dawn. And they're like, oh, thank goodness, because they have this, idea, that they want to make sure that they protect that relationship with the pharmacist, with their provider too. So, we've had multiple patients with that story. So we're really thankful for, for everything that Impact does, and specifically for you, Dawn, for the research that you've done and the ability that you've given us to, again, build that relationship. So we thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I just love working together, and yes, help more people. Yes.
That's right. That's right. So let's end with that. We're so thankful again for the relationship, a piece of this, but then also for the amount of patients that we're able to help along the way. So
thank you.
Thanks.